The following is a Comfortably Zoned Radio Network production.
Well, welcome to tonight's Duke's Court. I'm here with shoeless Chris Fletcher, Gary the Spaceman Kinn, and I'm Dave Cool Papa Bell. Finoli. We'll go with that. Does that sound okay, Bell or Finoli?
I think you wear either one of them pretty well.
Yeah, I think you do too, Dave.
All right. I always liked that. It was always my favorite name, Cool Papa.
That's a cool nickname.
Oh,
definitely.
Well, good evening, gentlemen. Tonight we're going to talk baseball. Gary brought up the subject of beer texture, but I think we'll save that for another night.
That's right.
But, let's hop right to it. No pun intended.
I like it. Well, our first subject is going to be about next Tuesday's All-Star game. All-Star games in just about every major league have been reduced to skill competitions as far as what fans are interested in. Basketball is unwatchable. Hockey, I thought it was kind of neat when it went to the 3-on-3, but before that, certainly unwatchable. Football's the worst. The three of us could have more physicality in a touch football game than the NFL does in theirs. And baseball's always been the king. It's always been the one that resembled the game we watch day in and day out. Lately, it's kind of fallen off a little bit as far as in the fans' interest. Now 34 players on a roster. As always, one player comes from each team. There have been questions on are there too many players at this point in time? Do you really need one from each team? Personally, I think a 30-man roster is plenty enough. I kind of like the one player from each team. I think it kind of, from an interest standpoint, it's good PR to at least like a year where the Pirates are having, where it's an average season, so to speak, but there are no real all-stars on the team. But it's reason to watch late in the game and hope Vasquez gets a chance to get in there. One thing I've never been a fan of is the fan vote, although this year they seem to have done better than most. I don't like the players or managers doing it. I think when the managers choose the folks they do and make their decisions, oftentimes it's to give their own people an extra little jolt in the game or rest their own people, and not necessarily what's good for the game. I think, and this might not be a popular decision, I actually like what Selig did. One of the few things I really liked what he did when he made the game worth something. He made it the winner. It's the home field advantage, because I think if in my eyes it's still the king of all-star games, but the one reason to me it's lost luster is the players just don't seem to give a damn about it. You hear stories of once they get pulled from the game, they're on a plane going back. You don't have the episodes of Rose going into Ray Fosse, although some may say that good, but to me that was a guy who cared about his league winning a game, and I thought Selig trying to put that back into the game was probably something I liked. I liked having it mean something. Our great friend Billy the Catfish Rainier, one thing he told me as I was talking to him about this subject, he said, look at the ballot, look at the players. The best players are there, sure, but there's no player you look at and say, I'd kill to see him. I really want to tune in to see this, because this is one of the all-time great players. There might be some out there eventually, but it seems like the best players are so young, they're not to that point yet. And I would tend to think if it's lost luster, that's probably the two reasons why it has: the players' attitude towards it, and the fact we're not looking down at people we can definitely say, this is Ted Williams, this is one of the all-time greats, this is Hank Aaron, this is Willie Mays. As I said, they may be, and they are the best in the game, and maybe the political correctness of these players cortisol makes them kind of neutral and takes that sometimes you need a little bit of an a-hole out there to create some interest. But that's kind of the thoughts I have on the subject. Gary, what were you thinking about it?
Well, Dave, honestly, I'm in agreement with you on a couple things, and I'm not on others. And
okay,
I think it's interesting, and I think this is going to be an interesting topic, like some of the things we talked about. I think a couple things have really reduced the game's interest level, and I think they go back to some really simple things. I'm not emotional about this, so don't tease me, Fletch. But going back into the 70s, when you talked about the All-Star games, you had a distinct breakdown between the leagues. You had the American League, which quite frankly was slow to add, black or Hispanic players, and the National League, which did it pretty readily, pretty quickly. And that animosity about that, I think, between the two leagues carried for a number of years, probably carried from just beyond even Robinson, but going into the 50s and carried into the early 70s, which is, I think, why we saw the game be quite a bit more competitive. So I think that was one of the reasons that the game was played a little more intensely. I think it was managed differently, and I think it was played differently than it is now. I mean, once we started to blend the leagues, particularly in the Selig era, and all the free agency movement back and forth between leagues and things like that, it blurred the line between the two rivalries between the leagues. I don't know if you're ever going to be able to restore that. I don't think you can, but I have some ideas on it, but that's one thing. I think the second thing is the overexposure of the game everywhere, which is good in some ways and bad in others. I think we've talked about this before in the other sports. I mean, when you're seeing these guys all the time, I do think there's some you're right, the players right now are a little younger and they haven't had long tenures and they're making so much money. It's quite a bit different than 30, 35 years ago. But you really get the product all the time, 24/7, 365. Back when you looked at the All-Star games that I think, kind of enjoyed and I think were much more intense in the 70s and even into the mid-80s, you had cable television, but you didn't see every game and every team every day. So you really had to see that All-Star game to see some of those guys who were having a big year like Kemp is this year for the Dodgers. Now you can get that pretty much, you can punch that up the minute that the game is over, and I think that's quite frankly driven the attention down, just like it has in a lot of other sports. And I think the last thing is I think there's just too many players. I think it's too much of a cavalcade now, people coming in and out. Baseball's not played that way any other day of the year. I certainly am not expecting a guy to go in and pitch 5 innings in an exhibition game. It doesn't mean anything with all the money involved today. But the game's not played to win it anymore, despite what they say. I think Selig's point, Dave, that you raised about trying to make the game have some relevance by making it a factor, and who had the advantage in the World Series was nice, but it also feels contrived. And I think that, if you really want the game to be important, I think you can have a 30-man roster. I don't think every team has to be represented. I think the best players should be represented. I think the fans are doing a better job, and it might be all the statistical stuff that's available in the past few seasons. I think actually now they've taken it away from the manager that is doing it. I think they've kind of made a combination of commissioner's office, the manager, and even the players. I think that's probably a pretty good system. I think that's probably why some of the players that are there this year probably do deserve to be there. It might not have gotten there in the past. But I don't think every team has to be represented. I really don't think with the way the game is available today, the games watched on TV, honestly don't know if in Pittsburgh or Philadelphia they didn't have a representative. I don't think it would make much of a difference. It may make you stick around till the 7th, 8th inning to see if Vasquez has a role in it or Nola does. But on the other hand, I don't really think it keeps most fans interested. And the ratings show that. It's interesting. There's a lot more available today in the summertime than the All-Star game. But with the MLS rise, with like the World Cup this year, for example, but the ratings in 1970 were 16 million households. Even in 1980, 27 rating, $20.5 million house, 20.5 million households rather. In 2011 to 14, the rating got to 7. It's fallen to 5.5 on Fox. And I think it's that people have become convinced that this is nothing but a circus. It's really not a game that's played competitively anymore, and I think that's one of the reasons that the attention is dropping. Plenty of other things to do. You can see your team 162 days a year at home and away now, and I think it's really taken away from the game. So to me, I think my solutions would be as follows. I think a 30-man roster is fine, but it should be the best players, and if 3 or 4 teams aren't represented, they're not represented. Who picks? I kind of like the change that they made. I think a combination of all of the above, the players, the commissioner's office, and the fans is probably a pretty good choice. And I honestly think that you should play the game more competitively. I mean, these guys are in such wonderful shape and they brag about it all the time. There's no reason that the best starter, whether it's DeGrom or Scherzer, can't go out and pitch 3 innings. I do know you have to put limits on this, and the teams themselves are at fault. The teams want their people there from a marketing standpoint and all that nonsense, but then they don't want them to participate very much. Change that. It's just not the way it's going to be played anymore. And I think that some of the incentives that these guys have been given for contracts and all the agent talk and all this other stuff, take this away. I mean, it's a pure exhibition game. Make it something that matters. Make it matter to the players. I don't know if it'll change it, but it's certainly not going to change it the way it is now. So that's my view on the All-Star game.
All right. Fletch.
Well, guys, I'm going to be in lockstep with most of what you said. I used to love the All-Star game. I've been to 4 of them. I've been to 2 in Pittsburgh, 1 in Seattle, 1 in California. And I love the spectacle, but not anymore. I think the problem with the All-Star game is that, I don't like this. Every team has to have someone who's represented. You have a guy in Kansas City who's hitting 250. Is that an All-Star? I don't think so. Do I really want to see him? No. I mean, to me, the worst of all time was Mike Williams. When he goes there for the Pirates, he's sporting something like an ERA in the neighborhood of 6. It's just embarrassing. And here's a little Pirate stat as it relates to the All-Star game. This will tell you a little bit about how baseball went through a period of very low relevance here in Pittsburgh for a generation. In the last 25 years, 16 of those years, the Pirates only sent 1 All-Star to the All-Star game, and that's only because they had to. That just tells you how bad that team has been for so long. But some of my favorite baseball memories have been around the All-Star game. I mean, that 94 All-Star game in Pittsburgh, it was just a magical night. I mean, one of the things I'll never forget was the standing ovation that Jim Leland, the manager of the Pirates at that time, got when he was introduced as a coach. I mean, the place went crazy for that. The 71 All-Star game was probably my all-time favorite when you had, these are the greatest players of my youth. You saw Clemente hit a home run. You saw Reggie Jackson take one off the tower in Detroit. I mean, it was a mammoth shot. And all the Hall of Famers that were in that baseball game, I saw a replay of that, a few months ago that I had taped, and it was just an amazing game. What you saw, Willie Mays, you saw Hank Aaron, you saw all these great players. And to what you said earlier, Dave, that I just don't feel that same thing. I mean, we have Mike Trout now, who is probably the player of this generation, and he's in California, and no one really knows. No one's really been able to see what a great player he is. Gary, I'm going to agree with you 100% also on the oversaturation. We tuned into the All-Star games because we saw players that we weren't going to see anywhere else. I mean, to be able to see Harmon Killebrew at bat, I didn't get to see that. I mean, that was you maybe got a game of the week if you were lucky, but to see all these players that you didn't see all the time, it was a really wonderful thing. And the other memory I have from the All-Star game was from the 1972 All-Star game, and it was in Atlanta. And Hank Aaron was playing for the Braves, and they took him out. And as an inning began, they had Al Oliver be able to run out to the field to replace him so that the hometown crowd could salute Hank Aaron. I mean, I think that it's important that whoever hosts the All-Star game, they definitely need to have at least 1 or 2 players that are there. I mean, that's part of the experience, but I don't know that we need to see players from every franchise. And I mentioned I went to an All-Star game in Seattle in 1979, and the Mariners were a very, very young franchise at that point, but the place went crazy when Bruce Bochy got up there and got a hit. And it was just a great atmosphere for baseball. And the other thing I remember about the All-Star game growing up, guys, is if you kept score, that was like the greatest challenge to be able to keep score of an All-Star game. Because it was just being able to follow everything and make sure who's getting replaced. I just don't feel the same sort of romance of the game anymore.
No. Well, let me add something to a couple of those games you referred to, and it's funny. I was thinking about the All-Star games, and you can only really rank. You can watch highlights of Greeny wins with Williams hitting the homer in 41 and some of the other stuff. But you really only, to me, I've talked about this as far as boxing is concerned. You really only rank what you've seen, fairly. But think about the games that you described, Fletch. 1971. You're right. All those Hall of Famers hitting home runs. Bench, Aaron, Robinson, Killebrew, Clemente. But remember how Blue pitched? Blue got the ball because he was 13-0 or 14-1 or something like that. Do you remember
14-1 at the All-Star break, yeah.
He was gunning that ball harder than he was during the regular season. And I think it was some league-related. It was such a big deal, and quite frankly, he had the pride that went with it. And I think, that All-Star game to me would be my top one for a lot of reasons because, A, all the players in it, but the way it was played. I remember that game being intensely competitive. It was only 10 years old, but watching it after the fact on the highlights and stuff like that, everybody agrees that whole era. Of course, 1970. I mean, Palmer and Seaver were gunning the ball as hard as they could in the regular season. I think they both worked almost 3 innings as starters in that game, and then we all know what happened in the 12th inning. I mean, Rose is certainly an egomaniac. That play might not have been necessary, but that was the intensity of the game. Even 94 with the impending strike. I mean, that was a fantastic game with McGriff's pinch homer in the bottom of the 9th, and then Moises Alou getting that hit off of Lee Smith. But, I mean, that game was played for one reason or another much more intensely than any in the 5 or 6 years prior and after. And the 1979 game, Fletch, you're fortunate to have gone to that game. I remember I think Parker made 1 or 2 throws from the outfield that cut down runs at the plate. And Zilli came in and he hit a pinch homer, and then he worked the count. I can't remember who the reliever was, but he worked the count to get on base in the 9th inning. Back then, the game was played a lot more competitively. I really think you may get some people that don't have an attention span beyond 3 minutes. That's a problem, not just about the All-Star game. That may be a problem in a lot of things. But people who like the game, if you played this game a lot more competitively, you said that. Look, guys, you all got here. You got here by the fan vote. You got here by the players' vote. But we're going out to win it. So you may not play. We're gonna try to play this thing to win it for one reason or another. I know they're making millions. What's the difference? I mean, if you're that much of a pro, you ought to be competitive enough to try to play the game to win it. And all the games you described there, people played to win it. That's the difference.
There's one other factor I would throw in there too. Keep in mind in those eras too, there were league presidents. The American League had a president. The National League had a president. They would have these incredible pep talks, from what I was told, that they would go in there and they would fire their players up because they were representing their league. Those positions don't exist anymore.
They do not.
No, but here is what you have here. Okay, in the first place, looking at the All-Star game, you have 2 games to look at to compare prior and now. Pittsburgh 1994, Pittsburgh 2006. 94 was the greatest moment I had at night I had at Three River Stadium, and I was there for both the 71 and 79 pennants. But that was the greatest baseball moment I had because of the intensity of that game, the excitement of that game. Mm-hmm. The NL hadn't won for years, and that was the joy of it. Move forward to 2006, I pay 3 times more for a ticket, and I'm treated to one of the blandest, unexciting, nobody gives a damn thing. The problem is, this is my opinion, and I agree with what you guys are saying. The game was intense. 71 was not just one of the great All-Star games, it was one of the great games in the history of baseball, at least in the history of modern baseball past 1950. But you have the money is the factor. Those guys back then, I'm sure a nice part of the bonus was tied into that All-Star game. And there was pride, and there was also a lingering fact every year in baseball. If I don't hustle my ass to make this team, or I don't bust my ass to have the greatest possible year I could, I might not be making money next year. I might not be doing that. That is a factor that's very important. It's going to be impossible to get at that level ever again. I mean, we've seen it. It's not coming back because these guys, they don't give a damn. I mean, same thing you look at a guy who falls down because he gets tipped on the foot and sits out for 10 days, compared to in the day where, these guys would hustle through injury and play for him through injury. Those days are gone. I mean, I love the All-Star game, but I sometimes almost would rather see the home run derby, and then that's it. I mean, to me, and it seems like when you look at the ratings, it bears that out. And I don't say this because I want to just see a home run derby. It just seems to me what's the only thing that kind of is intriguing at this point in time. I mean, it's nothing more than batting practice, before a game. I mean, you're not seeing 90-mile-an-hour pitches and seeing what people can do with them. So I don't like it from that aspect, but it seems like the only intriguing thing that people actually like about this whole weekend. I just think the attitudes are never going to change, and there's nothing you can do about it. Short of, the league falling in financial chaos and having to kind of ring things in. But, as bad as attendance is, as bad as the ratings are, that's not even in the realm of being close to happening, even with teams like Pittsburgh and Miami and Tampa Bay. I mean, it's a shame to say, because I'm with you. That was, to me, the king of what the season was, other than the World Series and playoffs, especially if Pittsburgh was in it. The All-Star game was the highlight of the year. But, I mean, you're never going to pull back the exposure, because exposure equals money. You pull back the exposure, you lose the money. And it's just, I'm just sorry to say that we're never going to see it again. And the hope was, with what Selig did, at least maybe have a bone in there for him. I mean, they're not going to come out and say, hey, the winners get a couple million apiece, because basically that would take too much out of the owner's pocket, and I just don't see it. I think it's a shame, and it really irritates me. And Fletch, what you said about keeping score, that was great. You hoped, and sometimes in the program, because I would always get the program before, they would sell it. There was a collectible shop in Monroeville Mall that would sell the programs a few days before the game. And they never gave enough space in between, and that would piss me off by the seventh inning. But by damn, I would find a way to get every batter in there. Just the challenge of it all. But it just, I look at 94 and 2006, and to me that's a good comparison to how this game has changed. And I mean.
Well, Dave, a couple thoughts I have on that, though. I'll tell you, a couple thoughts. Yeah. You're right. I mean, you're absolutely right using those two Pittsburgh games as an example, but think everything that happened. We basically changed the pennant race. We made the leagues bastardized as to everybody playing each other, right? We had even more TV exposure. And quite frankly, had an explosion in salary. So it contributed to all that. But, I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think, baseball can't talk out of both sides of its mouth. I mean, I think if they really want to make this game important, giving a one-game advantage in the World Series to, if you got, even if you got 8 playoff teams, you still got 22 franchises of people that don't care, and half of them going into the All-Star game don't have a chance. I don't think there's going to be any incentive generated by that. I mean, it was an attempt, but I think it's a lame attempt. Maybe you do have to put some money out there. And I think if you put some money out there, some guy's not going to say, hey, I'm worried about my, arm for the second half of the season. I'm only going to pitch my one inning. And some guy's going to say, look, I'm the best shortstop in the league. Leave me in there if it's a close game. I mean, there's a possibility of it happening there. I think it's small, but I think that's the only chance we have. And I agree with you on the home run derby, but honestly, that's become a circus too. I mean, again, let's don't tease me. I don't need to see everybody's kids running around, guys jumping up and down. Let's make it like the old TV home run derby. You got 3 guys on each side. You win your round. You move on to the next round. Let's do that. I mean, we don't need to know how human these guys are, by showing how their kids run around or jumping. I mean, it's a circus. I mean, I know they're trying to get the casual fan who doesn't care about the game to watch this stuff because they get all these advertisers signing up and stuff. But I mean, to me, it's become a complete joke, and half the people who should be in it aren't in it.
And I agree with you, but look at the ratings. I mean, it's the only thing that sells about the whole weekend.
You're right, and it's because you're changing the personnel, to my view. Most people who don't care about the game the way the 3 of us do get a little disinterested by the 3rd inning when everybody's coming in and out and you don't even know who's on the field. So, I mean, I think if you played the game a little more competitively, some people might stay with it. But I agree. You're right. I mean, the information does bear that out. But I also don't understand the home run derby anymore, where half the time ESPN's talking about nonsense and showing somebody's kids running around. I mean, what's that got to do with it? I mean, that's typical ESPN behavior, and honestly, I would junk it, or I wouldn't do it every year. But they're not going to do that because of the ratings. You're probably right, David. At least let's make it like the old home run derby was on television years ago. And it's not because I'm a purist or anything. I mean, at least there it's a true competition. Now it's a competition for about 35, 40 minutes, and it's 2 hours of nonsense.
Yeah.
I mean, so to me, make it an hour, make it an hour and a half, and make it a true competition between and I don't know, let the if a guy doesn't want to participate, that's fine. But on the other hand, whoever's going to be in it, just keep it moving and keep it focused on what the contest is.
Yeah, it's funny, Gary, you're talking about family at the All-Star game. I was working the '94 All-Star game, and I was sitting in the locker room. I was talking with Tony Gwynn, and he had his son Chris Gwynn there at the time. He was probably, I don't know, maybe 9 or 10 years old, and he's running around. And Tony just looks at me. He says, "Excuse me for a second," and he yells over to his son to settle down. He says, "Listen, you're in the locker room for the All-Star game. Show some respect." It was really just a great moment, and then he went back just talking about hitting, very, very matter of factly. But you're right; it's grown into such a great spectacle, but it's moved away from baseball. Is the problem?
I mean, I don't have a problem if they show their child there with them, but I mean that's all ESPN wants to focus on. Like, what are you going to make these people like? All of a sudden entertainment icons? I mean, no, you're not. I mean, it's a baseball contest related to the baseball game, so focus on that. Then the other stuff is secondary to me, and that's pretty much that's why Gwynn had all the hits he did. That's why he had such a long career. That's why he's revered now. I mean, there's a certain church to this that can't be completely ignored. ESPN ignores the church of everything. So, having them on that is probably the worst thing in the world. But, baseball, we've talked about this many times. The biggest focus they have is money. So, if they're bidding the most for it, they're going to keep it there. But, I mean, at least to make it a true – I think even a woman who might just think that's better than any baseball game she's ever seen, or even a guy who can't stand baseball – watches it a couple years. By the third year, you're losing your interest with all this nonsense. Yeah. Or if it was a true competition as well, just like the game, I think you'd probably have even better ratings, Dave, is my view.
Well, and I don't disagree with you. I mean, I'm not saying I'm a fan of it. I'm just saying it seems like the only thing
that's what they are.
Out there.
What you're saying.
I love the old home run derby. That announcer, I got.
Oh, he's great.
Yeah. What's his name?
I don't remember, but they played it. They did it at a place called Wrigley Field in California.
The original home of the Angels.
Right. And they and the thing about it was that it was done in the off season, and so I would read about how a lot of the players actually, even though they competed and they would win, they would get at that time a check for them for winning that was a pretty big deal because they weren't making a lot of money. But they would talk about how their hands would be blistered because they hadn't been playing for months. And their hands were raw, and it was you look back at some of those and some of the great matchups, and you see a very young Frank Robinson and a young Willie Mays and a young Hank Aaron. It was really those when ESPN Classic was on. That was always a treat to have the home run derby come on.
Absolutely, and that would be good, and that would be interesting in the off season if they could. Again, it'd take a lot of money, but. If you could coerce people to come in to do that, then that would be a good way to sell the game in the off season because it is interesting. It is more interesting. I agree with you, Gary. I don't know what the hell it constitutes to win the damn thing now, but that would make that simple. That better at least.
Make it simple. Pick Stanton and Judge. Say, look, you're a Major League Baseball representative. You need to be here. Pick some other guys that are hot. Guy has an injury or something. Where he's got to swing like Bellinger, that he's got to worry if he's starting to try to pump all the time. I can understand guys not wanting to be in there, but you're in there, and here's what's happening. Okay, this is round one. You're gonna be patched against somebody. You lose, you're out. Just like the old home run derby. Like this stuff now, I don't get. And honestly, I just get entirely tired of the Berman years ago with all that stupid back, and back. Joe Buck and all this nonsense. I mean, just quiet. Just have the contest and end it there. And honestly, the people who love baseball are tuning in anyway. That's probably what they want to, I think.
Well, they want that, but they're trying to utilize. I mean, it's always been a big seller in the Olympics, the Olympic story, which I never, again, could give a rat's behind about.
Right.
Somebody's father I want to know how the hell you got here, and I want you to compete, and I want to see you win, or how the competition goes. That's what but again, maybe I'm a minority. I know I'm not a minority here, but maybe of the viewers, they tune in to see the emotional story that's going to tug your heart. I got a text from Major League Baseball. I get the updates from the MLB app, and they did something about some dog that's going to tug my heart. Why the hell do I want to look at Major League Baseball app? I want to see what happened in the game last night. What interesting stat happened? And I mean, every league is getting caught up in this now.
Yep.
And it goes into the All-Star game. It's let's make everything human. Let's tug people's hearts and make them cry. I mean, I cried at the end of the 92 and 72 NLCS because I was pissed. I don't want to get all weepy and emotional.
Anyway, right.
Yeah, because a dog or we introduced every day a new military guy comes home. That's great. Don't get me wrong. I think it's emotional to see the family, but it happens every day, and this is what they're touting on their site instead of the game. And I do think that is one of the things, bottom line, that hurts, promoting these players. I want to see what the hell they do on the field. Again, I don't want my heartstrings tugged at something that has nothing to do with baseball. I don't want to be a cold, heartless bastard like Gary. I hope I'm not coming off like that.
I think if you're a professional athlete and you've been competitive your whole life and you've been competitive enough to get there, if you set up a situation that's competitive enough, despite the money, I think you're going to see some of that come out. But that home run derby now, it's a big circus show. Let's not make it a circus show. You guys are leading the league in home runs. You're going into this.
And they're not there. They're not the ones there, unfortunately.
Right, but you're going into this, and we're not going to have you take 100 swings. Right. You're going to get 5 or 6 pitches per round, and if nobody hits any, then we'll start again with the two of you. But we're going to play it off that way, which is what the old show was. I think some of those guys are going to take that pretty seriously then, Dave. And I think the same thing goes with the game.
Yeah, I mean, I have a more pessimistic view of it, and I hope I'm wrong, but I just see them more not interested in any of this than, I just always remember Bonds. Every time he'd leave, he'd be the first guy out of the dugout, first guy in a car leaving, and then everybody would follow after, and that's always just kind of irritated me. But
irritates me too. I just think that not everybody's like quite that level of
the Barry Bonds,
right? Right. So it's a shame because it was truly a unique sports event. I think it just gets washed away with all of the current mentality we're in, so many other factors, agents and contracts and everything else. But it is a shame because it was something that as a sports fan you really looked forward to.
But I think it's still the best out of all the leagues.
Yes, it is. I agree.
As tough as it's been. But one thing is we talk about a lot of here, and we're going to go into our second subject, that again might do more to hurt the game than hurt the All-Star game than help it, is the talk of radical realignment in baseball. The talk of adding a team in Montreal, adding a second team to go to 32, which right now the one team or the one city I hear more than any other is Portland. I've often talked of North Carolina, but the more I talk about from people from that region and some other fans, there are a lot of people, not a great sports area, and might not be the best area to go for baseball. But those are the two areas right now that are being talked about. And with that, there has been a lot of talk around what realignment would look like at that point, from reducing the games to 162 to 154, which I'd rather they keep it 162, but I wouldn't. To me, it's not a deal breaker if they go down a little bit. But what seems to be constant, I mean, Sports Illustrated, in a weird way, I like the best. They had it basically just saying, make a 16-team National League and a 16-team American League without divisions, and so many people go to the playoffs. Don't think that's going to happen, but it's actually how the USL, the league the Riverhounds are in, works, and it actually works kind of neat the way the playoffs are set up through that, and you don't miss the divisions going through that. But the one constant I look through is setting up by region, supposedly reducing travel costs, travel costs, and supposedly allowing these players to have more days off in the season by doing this. I look at Baseball America, and I'll do this, and then I'll throw it to you, Fletch, for your thoughts. But Baseball America has something that's kind of set up a lot like most people are talking about. The East would be consisted of Atlanta, Baltimore, Cincinnati, Miami, Philly, Pittsburgh, Tampa, and Washington. The North, Boston, Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, Montreal, both New York franchises, and Toronto, which would really suck for Cleveland, Detroit, Minnesota, Montreal, and Toronto. The Midwest, both Chicago's, Colorado, Houston, Kansas City, Milwaukee, St. Louis, and Texas. The West, Anaheim, Arizona, Los Angeles, Oakland, Portland, San Diego, San Francisco, and Seattle. I mean, it puts it in a neat package. It does what they intend to. I don't want to lose the American League and National League. And quite frankly, where I enjoyed watching it early on because you never saw those teams, I don't want to see it again. I want to see it in the World Series. And I think that might be a way to get the All-Star game a little more interest if we didn't have an early game. Again, we're not going to do away with it. It's not going away. But in situations like this where people are talking about one league, no conferences, and it might be being a traditionalist, it might not make a lot of difference to most people, I think that would be the worst thing baseball could do, to take away the identity of the two leagues, which it's been a prime thing for baseball since 1901, and even with the old American Association and National League in the older days. But I mean, it's going to dilute the game, sure, but I already think the game is diluted enough. So from that aspect, I don't mind the two extra teams because it's diluted. I don't think more teams are going to kill it any more than it already is from that standpoint. But with what they're talking about, and Manfred seems like the kind of guy that has no problem changing tradition. I think something like that is probable, and I think something like that would be a huge mistake. Fletch?
Well, the other thing that I read this week, and I didn't know this before, that there's plans that are going ahead for a 28,000 seat stadium in St. Petersburg too. So
yeah, they just announced that.
Add them to the list. Frankly, Dave, I think there's already too many teams. You also have with the two leagues, you also have two different rules, which I don't like. I mean, either you have the DH or you don't, but that's probably a different conversation. I don't know that the realigning is really going to fix what's wrong with baseball. And don't get me wrong, I do love watching a baseball game. It's not my favorite sport anymore like it had been when I was growing up, but it's still up there. I still enjoy going to a game. I still think that what they do, the ability to hit a round ball with a round object and hit it square is still, to me, one of the most difficult things in sports to do. People always talk about baseball players not being the greatest athletes, but just the ability to do that alone makes them pretty amazing. But, I mean, to me, if you're really going to look at fixing baseball, the things you have to look at is the games are way too long. I was looking randomly, and I saw that I went back to this game that Nolan Ryan had pitched, where he pitched 13 innings, struck out something like 17 guys, and the game was still under 3 hours or 3.5 hours. To me, it's just amazing. I mean, the amount of time it takes to go through a baseball game now. That the one that the Pirates played recently, that 17-run affair, the longest baseball game in baseball history, and you're going to lose a lot of the casual fans with that, and I think that's what we've seen. I also think that the way the game is being played now is a problem. When you have more strikeouts than hits in the game, where you have the bullpens that are so dominant now, and you don't have players having to see a pitcher more than 2 times. I mean, all of those things, little by little, have eroded what really made the game great. The shifts, at first when I heard people complaining about that, I thought, oh, they're just being cranky about the whole thing. But you look at it, and the amount of balls that are put in play anymore, it's a different ball game. It's not the same sort of pace, the same sort of energy level. So to me, realigning is not really dealing with what the core issues are with baseball right now. You're also losing a lot of kids from the inner cities that had been playing baseball before. I mean, there aren't a lot of African Americans in baseball compared to what there had been in the past. I mean, there's a lot of different issues that they're looking at, and realignment is just not the way to go at this point. I mean, I like on the other hand, I do like the idea of regional rivalries. I think that's great. I think we lost a lot when the Pirates and Phillies were separated, and the Pirates and Mets were separated from divisions. I mean, that was a great rivalry when both teams were good, and when they were competitive and looking to, one was always the foil for the other one getting into the postseason. So, the realignment, maybe if you bring some of that back, but to me, I'd rather concentrate on what needs to happen. I mentioned earlier in this conversation about Mike Trout. I mean, Mike Trout's a player that comes around once in a generation if we're lucky, and I don't think he's appreciated for what he's doing, and I think that's one of the problems with baseball. We have some great stars, but we're not seeing them. We're not as aware of what they're doing as we might have been in the past.
I think those are great points. I mean, one thing you said that kind of I think is hurting the game, and I feel the same way, because baseball used to be my number one sport. Right now it's college football. What is your interest in at this point?
Right now, I'm probably pro football number one, and then baseball, and then the NBA. Well, probably hockey. Yeah. Hockey's about to surpass baseball for me, actually. I'm going to be like Gary.
Yeah. I'm not to that point, but I know that. I used to be a baseball one and pro football two, but college football is significantly more important to me at this point than baseball. I will not miss a college football game. It doesn't hurt me if I miss a baseball game.
And I also remember, you look forward to when the new baseball cards came out, and you look at the stats. You also knew the players on all the teams, but I'm romanticizing the past before free agency and all of that, but and also being a kid at that point. But it's a different game. It's not. I truly believe also that it was better baseball that was played in our youth. That the players were developed better in terms of fundamentals. I mean, you didn't see people throwing to the wrong base. You didn't see some of the base running blunders that we're seeing, especially with this Pirates team. I mean, teams, their investments were different too. You could afford to have a signing be in the minor leagues and get some seasoning more so than you can now when you have some of those signing bonuses. But it's a different game, for better or worse. But I think realignment is not the answer.
Gary, what are your thoughts?
Well, I'm going to combine a lot of what you guys said. I mean, I think some of the issues in the game, Fletch, I think are bigger to be dealt with, and that's probably a different discussion. But I think the thing that really bothers me about the realignment is it, again, just smacks to me of a leadership group, a short-term ownership group, and of players that are really disinterested. That the bastardization of that and mixing the teams with no leagues and stuff like that, to me, is just completely offensive. I mean, it really misses where the rivalries are. The Mets rivalry isn't with the Yankees, and the Yankees rivalry isn't with the Mets. It's with the Red Sox. The
right.
Mets rivalry isn't with the Yankees. It was with the Phillies and the Pirates in the past, or the Cardinals. Mixing all these teams and putting them in geographic divisions, to me, is just complete and utter nonsense. It's not going to fix anything. You're making a feigned rivalry. The Cubs rivalry is not with the White Sox. It's with the Cardinals. The Dodgers rivalry is not with the Angels or the Oakland A's. It's with the Giants. Why would you upset that? If you're in a business that's under duress because of fan interest and revenue strain and lack of, seats being filled, why in the world would you upset the few things that work? It just makes absolutely no sense to me. And this nonsense with cutting down travel costs in $1 billion business is just beyond me. I mean, It is just beyond me that that's a key criterion for some of this nonsense. I mean, I have absolutely no taste for this at all. I mean, you probably do need, from a schedule standpoint, I don't want to see an interleague series every week. That's the selling creation that's just gone completely off the rail to me. I mean, some of these interleague games, Houston playing, Houston playing somebody like Minnesota. I mean, there is absolutely no desire or interest for those, even in the cities that they belong in, or they operate in. So, I mean, I think that adding 2 teams now is not going to hurt. And I think what you should do is have some sensible realignment. Like I read the same thing you read, Dave, about the 8 in each division. No way. I mean, no way to me. Go back to 4 divisions of 4. I mean, I'd go more with something along this line. NL East, Mets, Phillies, Pittsburgh, Washington. That could work. NL Central, Chicago, St. Louis, Milwaukee, Cincinnati. Some teams are going to get bothered by this. Maybe you got to move them around, but maybe move Houston back to the NL. But Atlanta, Miami, Houston, and I don't know. Colorado may not like it, but at least Houston and Colorado have the same time zone. And then out west, LA, San Francisco, San Diego, Arizona. That way you're not upsetting any of the rivalries that have been involved and have mattered over the years. And quite frankly, you're putting a Pittsburgh, Philly, and Mets back together, ironically, like you said, Fletch. And I think if you did something like that in the NL, it could work. The NL is a little more problematic. But how in the world could you be talking about breaking up New York and Boston, and if Baltimore ever gets competitive again, Baltimore? I don't know who else you put in there. Maybe it's Tampa because they're East, but I'd go with that. Detroit, Cleveland, Toronto. If they want to go to Montreal again, which I think to me is still a question mark, maybe you put them in there. There's a natural rivalry there in cities that, quite frankly, baseball's not the biggest game in the world anyway. Hockey is. Maybe that. Texas, Kansas City, Minnesota, Chicago, same time zone. They all play each other a lot in the past. No issue. L.A., Oakland, Seattle, keep them together. I think Portland's cracked. I mean, that market's not big enough. They couldn't even keep a AAA team there that moved 6 or 7 years ago, if I recall. Who knows why they're focused on that. But if they're going to expand and put it there, Seattle's just going to have to deal with it. Just like the Giants are going to have to allow Oakland to build a stadium in San Jose. I mean, these teams need to think a little more longer term than they've been doing. And honestly, the league records still matter to a lot of people. A lot of people follow baseball, and you could call us old purists or not, but NL records and AL records and all that stuff matter. You start bastardizing these leagues like this, trying to fix a problem, which I think is a little bit more important with all the things that you said, Fletch, I think need to be focused on. I mean, honestly, you're just taking it further and further away. You're just making it more and more common like everything else. I honestly don't think it's going to help the majors at all. And to me, it's too much interleague as it is. I'd go back and I'd play 156 games in your own league. That's pretty close to the old 154, and it's pretty close to 162. And if you couldn't win your division by playing 156 games in your league, or you couldn't get to postseason, too bad. One natural rivalry, which, who knows, the Yankees and Mets could be both good at the same time, and somebody out west gets to play, the Dodgers get to play the Angels who are awful, or vice versa. That could affect the playoff positioning, but it's only 6 games. It's less than 3% of the total season. I mean, to me, one series around July 4th or around the All-Star game, home and home, that's it. That's all you need. Some teams don't have a natural rivalry, but you can figure that out. One year Philly could play the Red Sox. The next year Philly could play Baltimore, so on and so on. But, I mean, there's too much interleague as it is. Going to more of that and mixing all these divisions makes absolutely no sense, and it doesn't fix the problems in the game like you said, Fletch. So, to me, I think the whole thing, I'm hoping, and not because of tradition, I'm hoping some of these owners make such a stink about losing my games with the Cardinals if I'm the Cubs, or the Dodgers losing my games with the Giants because of the way they're going to change this around if they're talking about it. I hope there's such a stink made that it never happens. And honestly, why does it have to be radical? I mean, can't you do something like I'm suggesting? You still keep the leagues together. You got smaller divisions. You got 4 division winners. If they want to add another 2 stupid teams to the playoffs because they won 12 in it like some of the stuff I saw, fine, have the wild cards. Then pick the 2 best second-place teams and have them play the 2 weeks division winners. I don't even like that. I don't like this one-game nonsense because they had some good ratings in the 90s for a few of those ties. But if you want to do that, that's fine. But do not change the leagues around. It's not going to help anything. I mean, it really is. I'm completely with you guys, and I would not even consider some of the stupidness that's out there, like days off and travel. I mean, my rear end. I mean, that's got nothing to do with this. I'm not playing the game, but you're making millions of dollars a year. You can't brag on the one hand you're so in shape and look at the athlete I am, and then you're complaining about having to play the next day after taking a flight. This has been going on in baseball for 100 years. And, the schedule could work better if you had 4-4s as well. You could probably play about 20 games within your own division. That's half the season. That division matters. You could play the next closest division to you geographically. Maybe you could play them 12 times or something like that. You could play the other two teams, the other two divisions that are far away from you in your league 6 times, once home and away, and one interleague series. That wouldn't reduce the travel costs and the fatigue for these guys? I got to believe that it would.
But again, travel cost, it's ridiculous. It's laughable that this is in here. But I will say, and I think this maybe this is leading into maybe a conversation for next week too. 3 things kill baseball: owners who know nothing about baseball, general managers who are sucking into these metrics. Metrics are important. They're supposed to be an aid. They're not supposed to run the game. That's one of the big problems. When these kids are being brought up, they're taught the metrics. They're not taught the basics of baseball. They're not allowed. I mean, if it's true that Garrett Cole wasn't allowed to pitch to his strengths in Pittsburgh because they wanted him to pitch to contact, which I hate that concept. That's just ridiculous. Neil Huntington has destroyed this team. You can say what you want about Bob Nutting, who should never be allowed to own a team. Don't get me wrong. Neil Huntington has destroyed this team by bringing in metrics. Neil Huntington a couple years ago said, guys who can play different positions, that's the future of the league. That wasn't the future of the league. Power was the future of the league. And to me, the metrics that have been come up that have made Sabre big, that's made supposedly the average fan more understand the game better, which it doesn't because you need a glossary to read the damn book. That is killing the game. Metrics are killing. Launch angle. What the hell? Launch angle is added to the strikeouts in my eyes. Right. I mean, this is what's killing the game. And you both are absolutely on target. It has nothing to do with the realignment. You're going to kill what makes baseball special by taking away the leagues with these. And Manfred is bad for the game. He's worse for the game than Selig because he's not grasping the problem. He's trying to do radical things to change the things that don't need fixed. And I just, boy, you just don't get a good outlook. And you hope the game is good enough that eventually these will all smooth out. But general managers running the game, managers becoming lackeys of the general manager now. It's just a manager has to have, a good manager has a feel for his team and a feel for what needs to happen at the time. Not being told you got to play this guy because we're paying him $5 million, or you got to I want you to do this pull this guy at 70 pitches because this metric suggests this. I mean, to blame pulling Jamison Tyon out, you know what? He looked like he was getting tired when he gave up the 3 runs the other day when they're up 2-0. Okay, I don't have a problem pulling him out for that reason, but don't come back and say the metrics suggest. He pitched 77 pitches. Metrics suggested nothing. I just
want to add a story here, Dave. Yeah. You guys, I don't know if you guys read this. Last year's World Series.
Yeah.
Rich Hill is a 6-inning pitcher. We all know that at best.
Yeah.
But he's sailing along, I think, 1 hit through 5 innings. This genius, Friedman, who really never won anything in Tampa. That's the thing that amazes me about the game now. This guy's such a genius. Tampa never won anything. They never won a World Series. They got to 1. They got to a couple playoff series, and they lost. Same thing with Madden. But this genius calls down to the dugout, apparently, and says, you need to take Hill out because the average goes up against him in the middle innings or after the 6th inning to X, Y, and Z. Roberts said, apparently, he's sailing along. They said, take him out. Sure as hell they take him out. The bullpen gets taxed. They end up losing the World Series. There's really no place for that kind of stuff. If you need automatons to run these teams, then why in the hell are you doing any of this other stuff that they're doing? It's just that stuff's got to go. I couldn't agree more, and I've argued with people who never played the game and haven't watched the game for years about this kind of stuff. I couldn't agree with that concept more. But getting back to the realignment issue, that has nothing to do with those problems. What you're going to do is take away any of the history and the rivalry that's built up. I got to believe the Cubs' biggest ticket sales are when the Cardinals come in, and the Cardinals are when the Cubs come in. Now, they're going to play each other in that same division, but then you're going to be playing a whole bunch of other teams that there's no connection with. I do think that, taking Pittsburgh away from Philadelphia and New York hurt the Pirates at times, particularly when they were bad. And I think it probably even hurt those other bigger cities back here in the East. So, taking that away doesn't fix any of the problems that we're describing. And that, to me, just shows the lack of thought process, the lack of leadership in the game. He should be telling some of these owners right now, no, we're not doing that. We're not doing that. We're not worried about your operating costs. You fix your operating costs, okay? We're going to try to make the game a little bit better. We're going to try to restore it to prominence. That's got nothing to do with the fact that you're trying to reduce your hotel bills and your airfare. Change the schedule to reduce that from the ridiculous schedule you got now, with all these interleague games and flying across the country for a series in Tampa if you're in Seattle and having to get back out to the West Coast to fill out the schedule requirements. That's where you focus. You don't necessarily focus on the fact that somebody, and I agree with you. I don't know Huntington like you guys do, but I can't even believe somebody would make that kind of comment. Why would you even make that kind of comment to the media? You make yourself look like a fool, and you make the person managing the team look like a fool, and you make everybody else look like a fool that you can't think other than this is what the spreadsheets say. There's just no place for that stuff to me. I'm completely with you, Dave.
But, anyways, we're gonna. You had a comment, Fletch?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, going back to strikeouts. Back in the day, and my God, I'm sounding like an old man here, but when there were two strikes, people protected the plate. There weren't the same amount of strikeouts. Now it's still the all or nothing thing, and the players, they're not doing what we were all taught is fundamental baseball.
Metrics are killing the game. I agree. Couldn't agree 100%.
I believe that stuff will ultimately fix itself. The shifts and the strikeouts. I'm not sure we're going to go back to see the quality of baseball we may have seen in the past. I think we're going to continue to see strikeouts and home runs be a target. But I do think some of that stuff will fix. That stuff is something to be focused on. That's where the leadership of the game should be focused on, not all this other stuff, which to me is a contrived rivalry. And why would you try to match all the other sports when, quite frankly, you're behind them right now? You guys have said it yourself, in terms of what your favorite sport is. Why make a contrived aspect out of it? Keep what's there and fix the problem on the field. I think all the other stuff will fix itself.
People have been laughing for years, but they're not laughing as much now. Soccer's coming up on baseball's ass, and they better watch out.
Yep.
Because that's where the kids are playing right now. But anyways, we're going to go into our lightning round. Our memorable moments of the past week. Originally I was going to talk about Europe's dominance in the World Cup, which has been the greatest World Cup I've seen. But Pitt hired a baseball coach, and that's going to be my big thing of the week. They hired Florida State's Mike Bell, and it puts into light exactly what Heather Light, who gets some press, doesn't get the press she deserves. She is basically, at the University of Pittsburgh, is taking the notion that Pitt can't compete in the ACC because of this, because of that, and blah, blah, blah. She's saying bullshit to that. She's going out and they're spending money on people that can recruit in the South, people that know the ACC. She got Mike Bell, who's been a great assistant at Florida State. Florida State, one of the great programs. But it's beyond that. They've hired a men's soccer coach, Jay Vidovich, a soccer program that has been embarrassing for years. It's never been good. They played well in the Big East, but the Big East in soccer was nothing. They hire a guy who's won a national championship and 3 Coach of the Year awards in the nation, in Jay Vidovich. And the team was ranked at one point last year. She goes down and has hired a women's chief. She fired the highly popular Susie McConnell, Serio. I'll use the Serio, who had just, again, couldn't compete in the ACC. So she goes down and And she gets a big name in Lance White, who spent 15 years, again, at Florida State. Very successful team under a very successful coach. Hires a successful gymnastics coach from Arkansas, Samantha Snyder. They hire in women's soccer. They hire a guy who coached at Notre Dame, had a 399, 108, and 29 record, who I believe also won a national championship, if I'm not mistaken. She's hired a guy in wrestling, Keith Gavin, who certainly has the program headed in the right direction. A diving coach, I don't know much about diving, but by damn, I think she's got to be good with the rest of these people, in Katie Hazelton. But most importantly, she goes out. Jamie Dixon can't recruit in the ACC. Nobody can recruit. Pitt's going to be at the bottom of this is a joke. They hired Stallings. It's going to take 10 years. She goes out and gets Jeff Capel. Jeff Capel in a matter of 2 months. And think about this. It's past the recruiting time. Recruits have been signed. He goes out and in a matter of 2 months after recruiting is all done and recruits the 30th ranked recruiting team for next year. That to me is mind-blowing. This woman has all of a sudden made Pitt athletics relevant again. Now, she believes in Narduzzi. I believe in Narduzzi. I think Narduzzi's, what he's doing with his defense this year, again, might not have the breakout year this year, but I think they're close because of this. But I think this woman has basically said screw you to every AD that had been in there before accepting these premises. Well, we're in the North. We can't do this. We can't do that. And she's saying bullshit to it. And I applaud her. And this hiring of the coach today, love Joe Giordano, did a heck of a job. But, I mean, the players weren't coming up here to compete. I believe this guy can get the players that at least, you know, we're going to be in some NCAA tournaments in the near future. But I think she has basically gone and become one of the strongest, if not the strongest, front office, AD, GM, whatever you want to call her. But she is making her mark on Pitt in a short period of time. And if I'm Pitt and I want to put my money out there, I'm going to put it first to make sure she doesn't leave. Because right now, for the first time since they moved to the ACC and the first time, you know, after following Pitt athletics since the 70s, it's the first time I can say that the Olympic sports at Pitt are going to be just as strong as what basketball and football were at one point. And that's how you build an athletic program, and that's how you attract student athletes to come to a school. So to me, she is the most memorable moment of the week by hiring such a horse in baseball, and then just looking back at what she's done in her short tenure here. And I think I applaud her. Gary?
Dave, I don't know. That's interesting what you said, and for hearing what you said about that, I do too. It's a fallacy that you're in the ACC, and that makes you non-competitive. The fact that you're in that prominent of a conference in any sport, you should be getting the better athletes. Agreed. And honestly, you got a better environment to go to college too in Pittsburgh than you do in a lot of the cities that are in the ACC. So I would be excited about that too, even though I'm not a huge Pitt follower. That's interesting. Interesting. My moment of the week was baseball related, and it was the 3 games in Washington last Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. On Thursday, the Nationals have been a huge disappointment. They fall down 8-0 by the 4th inning. They rally win to 14-12, and they played the game only in 3 hours and 15 minutes. Fletch,
nice.
You gotta love that. You know. The second night, Mark Reynolds, who had a big night the first night, hits a walk-off homer on Friday, and then on Saturday on national TV goes 5 for 5 with 2 homers and 10 RBIs. An 18-4 win. Those teams may be going nowhere, but that was quite a 3-game set over 3 days with everything that happened. So, you know, to me, that's my moment of the week. And the same night that the Nats scored the 18 runs, you had a team score 20 in Arizona over San Diego, and Boston scored 15. So it was a pretty memorable couple days in MLB for me.
So that's awesome. Those were some memorable games, and you mentioned 3 hours and 15 minutes. I was at the Philadelphia-Pittsburgh game on Friday, the 5-hour extravaganza.
Ooh.
That, to me, was one of the
I hope you peed before you left.
Oh, several times, my friend, several times. What did you like over the last week, Fletch?
Well, I'm going to read you guys a list of names and see if you can figure out what mine is. Yogi Berra has 10 of them. Margaret Court has 24 of them. Jack Nicklaus has 18. Henri Richard has 11. And Bill Russell has 11. And what we're talking about, gentlemen, are titles. This week, we had another guy who is the king of his sport, and that's Joey Chesnut. He won his 11th hot dog eating contest. This man is truly Ruthian in his appetite. He is the Jethro Bodine of his sport without any question. The fact that he downed 74 hot dogs. 74. I don't think I'd do 74 in 2 years. And I like a hot dog. But the other fact of it was that the next closest guy was 63. So at a certain point, he was just doing that for show. It's just like, I'm going to take you guys out. I don't care. I just don't care.
Decisive blowaway of his next closest opponent. A secretariat of hot dogs.
And I watched the dipping of the bun. That's why I can't watch that.
I watched 5 minutes of it and I was repulsed. I had to go away. But this guy is amazing. And this whole competitive eating thing, apparently there's competitive eating for butter. That just strikes me as wrong on so many levels.
Which I'm going to mention, Don Moses Lerman, okay?
Oh.
As I was watching, this man ate 6 sticks of butter, okay? 6 sticks of butter in 1 minute and 48 seconds. He ate 6 pounds of baked beans. Oh, I'm sorry. In 5 minutes, he ate the 7 quarter-pound sticks of butter. I apologize. He eats 6 pounds of baked beans in 1 minute and 48 seconds. Imagine that. Think about that. 6 pounds of baked beans. Do
not pull that man's finger. Whatever you do not pull his finger.
I'm trying not to think about it, honestly, Dave. I'm trying not to. I feel bad enough, and I'm eating 2 hot dogs a month. I couldn't imagine.
Well, this man ate 11 quarter-pound burgers in 10 minutes. 11 quarter-pound burgers and dry with nothing on them. I wonder if he dipped the bun.
That would sort of be like juicing, wouldn't it? That would be like juicing.
I think it is, but I think Don Lerman, he takes a back seat to Joey Chesnut, and I don't know what's more disgusting, 74 hot dogs or 7 quarter sticks of butter.
On the holiday, did you turn into the whole exciting spectacle at Coney Island on ESPN? Did you?
5 minutes of it. That's all I could stomach. It was just unbelievable.
Oh, that was classic.
Our human endeavor, I would agree.
Too bad you didn't have a chance to make that your bold prediction of the week.
Oh, who could bet against Joey Chestnut?
You can't. You can't. But I'm going to tell you a sad story for my bold prediction.
All right, go.
And I know you guys are gonna. I'm getting a little emotional thinking about it. I was rooting for England in this World Cup, and with the lack of America, you got to pick a team. I watched the Premier League. I was rooting for England. And I have a friend in high school. Her name is Marilyn Rudolph Marnell. And she somehow had a psychic premonition before the World Cup. I don't know that this girl's ever watched a soccer game. I'm not sure. But she had a psychic premonition that Croatia would win. So I'm thinking, okay, their run's over. This team sucks, okay? There's no way they're going to beat mighty England. So I'm going to bet you, okay?
Oh, no.
Okay? She loves coffee, okay? She's a coffee addict, okay? She needs help. And I told her, you have to stay off coffee for 3 days if Croatia loses. And so confident am I, you know my love of bacon, Fletch, okay?
Oh, no. No.
You know it more than anything. I'm so confident this is going to happen. I tell her I stay off bacon for a month if England loses. Okay? So England's up 1-0. I'm working the open shift this morning. I come home. They're up 1-0. They're dominating the game. Then they get tired. And Croatia scores late. And I'm getting pissed off because I'm thinking every friggin' morning I have a bacon, egg, and cheese biscuit at McDonald's on my way to work. Okay? I smoke bacon. Smoked bacon is the biggest delicacy of all time. So they go into overtime, and England's getting more tired. I'm thinking, I'm not going to say F on the show, so I'll just say what the F, okay? So I'm getting there. I'm tired. I'm trying to stay awake because, I'm up at 4 o'clock. And all of a sudden, England's just getting dominated. What the hell's going on? And in the overtime. In overtime, they play the full overtime. It's not sudden death. Croatia scores this half-ass goal in there. And I'm thinking, oh, my God. Every morning, biscuit, bacon, egg. I don't want egg and cheese biscuit. The bacon makes the biscuit. And they just die, and they lose, and they're crying. And I'm thinking, what the hell are you crying about? I've lost bacon for a month. And I go back to her, and I say, okay, what if I happen to order an egg and cheese biscuit, and I'm driving, and they throw bacon on it unbeknownst to me because I want to be honorable? How can I help that if I eat the biscuit if bacon happens to be on it, if I don't know? She tells me, I'm thinking she's going to take pity because she knows how I love bacon. No pity. No pity at all. So you know what the bet is? I'm going to say France is going to kick Croatia's ass in the World Cup final, and Maryland, you are going to have to eat a cold quiche. Do you know how disgusting a cold quiche is? You add that on top of that. On top of that, she's going to drink a very warm Iron City. Oh. And she's going to do it on Facebook, okay? We're going to see this. This woman that has taken bacon away from me for a month is going to suffer because France is going to kick the Vive la France. I'm going to eat a snail if they win in celebration. That's a sad story in my eyes. I don't know if you guys are getting as emotional as I am, but I'm going to have to.
Well, Dave, it explains something to me now. I didn't realize why there was going to be so many layoffs at Sugardale tomorrow, but now I understand it completely. But she's completely wrecked the bacon-based economy with this bet.
She's taken jobs away from America. Jobs away.
I'm really impressed by the intense, impassioned description of the entire situation. And the loss of the bacon.
Hello.
Horrible. Fletch, we'll do yours, and then we'll end with Gary, and then we'll be done.
Well, I have two quick ones. One, Joey Chesnut is from San Jose, California. This week there will be massive plumbing issues throughout the entire city of San Jose. So, just remember I called that. The other thing is it's also going to be sewer related, and it's going to be about the Pirates. And the great sell-off is going to begin this week, fellas. The first one, the big chip, of course, is going to be Vasquez, because when you're a team that's bad, you don't need an elite closer. And, even though he is an all-star, and I'm using air quotations with that, the sell-off begins this week.
All right. And Gary?
Mine isn't as impassioned as yours, Dave, and it's not as funny as Fletcher's, but on the ESPN app, the fight this weekend between Manny Pacquiao and Lucas Matisse, I think is one that I think is going to be a good one. I think they're both old. They're both well past their prime. They're slower. They can't get out of each other's way, and they're both action fighters. And I think it'll be one of the better. I think it has a potential to be one of the better fights of the year, primarily for those reasons. Pacquiao 40,
who wins?
37. I kind of think Pacquiao will win because I think even in old age, boxers still has a tendency to win. But I think there's going to be a lot of Leatherland, and I think it could be a very entertaining fight. You do have to have the ESPN Plus app to watch it, which I just added. But I think it could be one of those fights that's actually good for a sport that's really in more serious trouble than baseball. So that's
absolutely. Well, gentlemen, I'm going to go have some turkey bacon. Oh, God, I can't believe I said that.
Does that count? Does that count?
I got to ask her. I don't know. It says bacon. Maybe I have to have Canadian bacon, which is worse.
David, as impassioned as you are about this, don't have any coffee, though. I mean, don't have any coffee.
I can't stand coffee. Can't stand a hot drink. But, you guys have a good night.
You too.
All right, guys.
Bye.